Growing up in my family gives you a certain sense of history. I'm simply the latest in a line that can be traced back generations.
During so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations.
What happens when silence from the palace speaks louder than any royal decree? For centuries, the monarchy has thrived on tradition, ceremony, and control. But in one unexpected moment, everything changed. And it wasn't the king who led the way. I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. It was the next generation stepping forward, not with grandeur, but with purpose. William and Kate didn't wait for permission to lead. They simply began. And the world didn't just watch, they listened, felt, and followed. This is the story of how two voices reshaped the crown without ever reaching for it. The silence before the storm. It began with silence. Not just any silence, but a kind that lingers with weight. A simple message posted to the royal website read, "A formal announcement will be made at 6 p.m. No context, no further explanation." For a monarchy known for carefully choreographed events, such a sparse message felt like a shock wave. No leaks to trusted reporters, no whispers from aides, just that one line. And the world felt tension. Journalists scrambled, newsrooms speculated, and every royal watcher knew instinctively. Something was very wrong. It wasn't just about what was said, but what wasn't. The absence of information became its own alarm. Questions rang out across the press. Theories spiraled. Was it illness, abdication, scandal? In a world where every royal move is typically calculated, this lack of detail felt like a rupture. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily against public expectation. All eyes began to focus on the next move and notably on what would make it. William and Kate's sudden disappearance from an earlier scheduled appearance only intensified the storm. The Princess of Wales pulled out of a planned appearance at the Royal Ascot on June 18, hours before she was set to return to the annual horse race alongside Prince William. Their absence was no longer just noticed. It was suspicious. As the hours ticked towards 6, the public wasn't waiting for gossip. They were bracing for something deeper. The mood across the nation shifted. This wasn't going to be about tradition. It was about transformation. And in that breathless silence, the stage was set. Whatever was coming next wouldn't just ripple through the monarchy. It had the power to reshape it. The faces behind the message. When the clock finally struck 6, the screen lit up, not with the familiar faces of King Charles or Queen Camilla, but with William and Kate. There was no grand backdrop, no royal crest or ceremonial props, just a simple room, quiet and private like a study or a modest office. The absence of formality was intentional, and it hit differently. The royal family is slowly returning to some sense of normality with Prince William undertaking his first public duty. William didn't open with titles or tributes to royal lineage. He began with calm, grounded words. The monarchy is not just a symbol. It's a responsibility. That line alone signaled a shift. Not rebellion, but redirection. He spoke with clarity and purpose, and it became clear this moment wasn't about upholding tradition. It was about creating trust. Kate spoke next. Her tone wasn't soft. "William and I continue to be inspired to sing young people like you all here today." But it wasn't confrontational either. Her voice walked a careful line, controlled, composed, and steady. "This isn't about tradition," she said. "It's about trust." That single phrase echoed louder than any royal anthem. It wasn't just what they said, it was how they said it. There was no visible support from the monarch or his consort. William and Kate stood alone, yet stronger than ever. In their stillness, they redefined leadership. For the first time, it wasn't about who held the crown, but who truly carried its weight. Their message wasn't ceremonial. It was authentic. And for a public long fatigued by tradition, that authenticity hit like a thunderclap. The shift wasn't announced. It was embodied. William and Kate weren't waiting for permission. They were stepping into purpose with the world watching. The Diana Initiative, But this evening's Legacy Award is particularly special as it marks the 25th anniversary year of the Diner Award, a charity set up to reflect my mother's belief. Then came the true turning point. Kate introduced what she called the Diana Initiative. It wasn't labeled a tribute, though the name alone evoked powerful emotions. It was something deeper. This wasn't nostalgia for Diana's memory. It was a mission to carry her legacy forward in action. Kate made it clear this wasn't about photos, flowers, or anniversaries. It was about purpose. The Diana Initiative was announced as a global nonprofit aimed at embodying the very values Diana championed: compassion, transparency, and direct service to those in need. It wouldn't be a passive foundation run by figureheads. It would be driven with real presence, real participation. Kate declared she would be on the ground visiting shelters, talking with survivors, and showing up in places that needed help, not headlines. There would be no red carpets or curated media appearances. The focus would be on people, not performance. The public responded almost immediately. Social media lit up. Hashtags like #People's Queen and #Diana Lives began trending within hours. The sentiment was clear. This wasn't just about looking back. It was about moving forward with meaning. Kate's message echoed the spirit of Diana, but reshaped it for a new generation. She wasn't replacing Diana. She was continuing the unfinished work. The Diana Initiative wasn't just a royal project. It was a statement, one that said, "Service matters more than ceremony." Kate was no longer waiting to lead. She was already leading. And with one announcement, she reminded the world that compassion isn't weakness. Its strength and leadership isn't inherited, it's earned. The palace remained silent. While the public erupted in support, the palace responded with silence. The official social media accounts of the royal family made no mention of the Diana Initiative. No statements were issued by King Charles or Queen Camilla. Behind the scenes, insiders whispered that the mood was far from celebratory. Charles was reportedly stunned. He hadn't been briefed, and the move felt unexpected. It wasn't rage, it was confusion. He had finally stepped into his long-awaited role, only to find the spotlight shifting away. The world was now looking to William and Kate, not just as heirs, but as leaders in their own right. This morning, Prince William and Princess Kate at the center of the international stage. But for Camilla, the reaction was deeper and more emotional. She had spent years rebuilding her public image, moving from controversy to credibility. And now, with one heartfelt initiative, Diana's name was back in headlines, and not in scandal, but in grace. It brought old wounds to surface. Kate wasn't targeting Camilla, but the public wasn't confused about where their trust was leaning. Within the palace, advisors debated what to do. Some suggested bringing the Diana Initiative under official royal oversight, folding it into the institutional machine, but others knew the damage that could cause. It would appear controlling, even jealous. In the end, they chose silence. No public support, no coordination. Just let it fade. But the world had already made its choice. Kate's sincerity was winning hearts, and the palace's silence only made that contrast louder. Presence over performance. Kate wasted no time. She stepped into her role not as a figurehead. William hadn't meant to overshadow his father, but intention didn't soften impact. The lack of acknowledgement from Charles, no public support, no private reassurance, cut deeper than William had expected. It wasn't the opposition that hurt. It was the absence. Camilla, on the other hand, reacted differently. She wanted control. She urged advisors to fold the Diana Initiative into the royal machinery to sanitize and repackage it under palace oversight. But that suggestion was quickly dismissed. The optics would have been disastrous, an act of jealousy rather than leadership. So instead, the palace opted for passive resistance. No support, no cooperation, just silence. The hope was simple. Let it burn bright, and then fade. But it didn't. The Diana Initiative was the PR campaign. It was a movement. And movements don't vanish. William saw a tactic for what it was, and he stood firm. This isn't a discussion, he reportedly told an aide. It's a strategy. He wasn't seeking approval. He was building legacy, not one rooted in ceremony, but in substance. And that quiet defiance would mark the start of a new royal future, changing the royal blueprint. The shift within the monarchy didn't come with proclamations. It came through presence. William and Kate weren't waiting for future titles. They were redefining leadership in the now. According to one British journalist, the monarchy is in consummate hands after his son had a surprise encounter with Kate Middleton. Their influence grew not through tradition, but through trust. And slowly, the media began to reflect that shift. Headlines that once defaulted to Charles and Camilla's ceremonial duties were now dominated by stories of William and Kate's grassroots work. Not because they were louder, but because they were relevant. Photographers moved from palace gates to community centers. Journalists followed their steps into flood zones, classrooms, mental health clinics, and aides began shifting, too. Some by choice, others by recognition. The work coming from Kensington wasn't just fresh, it was meaningful. Junior royals saw an opportunity, not for visibility, but for value. Many began asking how they could contribute to the Diana Initiative, not to be seen, but to be useful. And that spoke volumes. This wasn't rebellion. It was realignment. The monarchy had long been built on legacy and hierarchy. But William and Kate were proving that leadership isn't about waiting. It's about showing up. The Diana Initiative became more than a foundation. It was a model, a living example of what modern royalty could be when guided by service instead of status. Even those skeptical of the monarchy began paying attention not to the crown but to the commitment. And with every hospital visit, every school meeting, every honest conversation, William and Kate weren't just rewriting protocol. They were rewriting purpose, a new kind of leadership. Kate's work wasn't limited to public moments. Behind palace doors, she led private sessions with survivors, experts, and advocates. No cameras, no media plans, just quiet, intentional effort. These sessions revealed patterns, systemic gaps in maternal health, racial disparities in care, and countless voices long ignored. Kate didn't interrupt. She listened and she took notes. It wasn't performance, it was preparation. Meanwhile, William was also dismantling tradition, one choice at a time. At a climate resilience forum, he arrived with no entourage, no special seating, no royal fanfare, just a name tag, a notebook, and a desire to contribute. When a child from a flood-hit community asked, "Are you here to help or just be seen?" William replied without hesitation, "To help. And if I fail, tell me." That moment was filmed casually by a volunteer. It went viral, but not because of the clip. It was the honesty that authenticity made people believe. Again, not in crowns, but in character. These weren't isolated choices. They were consistent signs. The Diana Initiative wasn't built on grandeur. It was built on humanity. The stories coming out weren't curated. They came from real people, mothers, students, staffers who had experienced William and Kate's presence. She looked me in the eye. One woman said, "Not like a royal, like someone who cared." The palace didn't announce these efforts. There were no newsletters, but the impact spoke louder than press releases ever could. It wasn't about appearing royal. It was about redefining royalty through service, humility, and presence that couldn't be ignored. From initiative to movement, what began as a heartfelt announcement quickly grew into something far greater. The Diana Initiative was no longer just a tribute. It had become a living, breathing movement. Its foundation was built on values that went beyond charity, accountability, visibility, and global collaboration. Kate made one thing clear from the start. This would be a transparent mission. Every donation, every partnership, every decision would be public, not as a marketing move, but as a promise. Trust must be earned, she said, not inherited. And that single line became a cornerstone of the initiative's approach. The UK efforts soon expanded overseas. Mental health clinics in Canada joined the network. The Canadian Institute for Health Information, and it suggests there's been a shift in how children in Canada are accessing mental health treatment. Maternal health projects in Southeast Asia became partners. Grassroots organizations in Africa found common purpose. But this wasn't typical royal patronage. William and Kate didn't just send letters of support.